Thank you for joining me today. It's Brian Gubernick, and welcome to the No Days Off podcast, where we believe that every single day brings a new opportunity to get better. Today, we are going to talk about learning, but we're not going to talk about learning in the way most people, I think about it. See, most people learn whenever they feel ready to do so. They take the course that they need to take whenever the timing is right, or they read the book when they find the time. They just simply study the topic when motivation strikes. And I think because of that, most people are perpetually waiting to learn. They're waiting until they feel prepared enough or until they feel confident enough. Bottom line, they're just waiting for what they perceive to be the right moment. And if we're being honest, that moment may never really come. Well, today I want to share with you a different approach. It's one that I've been using for a number of years, and one that I think is incredibly powerful in terms of personal development tools. And I think it's available to all of us, entrepreneurs, members of the No Days Off Nation. I call it forced learning. And I know there's a number of others out there today that also recognize this term, forced learning. Here's the concept. Instead of waiting until you've learned something to commit to it, you instead commit first. Let me explain. Okay. Pat Flynn talks about this in his book called Lean Learning. He calls it the voluntary force function. The idea is that you deliberately create a situation that makes learning unavoidable. So the idea again is that you deliberately create a scenario or a situation that makes learning unavoidable. So you don't wait for motivation. Instead, you engineer a deadline of sorts. You create or you manufacture some pressure. And then you let that pressure do what pressure typically does. And what does it do? It produces. It usually gets us into action. I want you to think about this the way I think about maybe training for any sort of running race, ultra marathon, whatever you want to call it. You don't wake up one day feeling ready to run 100 miles. You sign up for the race first. The registration confirmation is the actual commitment. And then everything follows. Then you start to train and sacrifice, and you have all the prep work and the programming and all of that. So you sign up first, and it prompts all these other activities. That all comes after the initial commitment, not before it. Forced learning works the exact same way. Okay. So here's how I personally apply this. I actually use two different versions of it. And both of these versions have been game changers for me. The first way I do this, my number one hack, is that whenever I identify something that I need to learn to up my game, I immediately look for an opportunity to teach it to others. And I get it on the calendar. Not after I've learned it, but right now, before I'm ready. So pick a topic. I want to learn more about, XYZ in business, something I may not know all that much about. What I'll do is I will find a group or my team or even business peers and say, hey, 30 days from now, I want to run a class around this topic. And what does it do? It's a force function. It prompts me to have to go learn. So maybe for you, it's booking a workshop, or maybe it's committing to some sort of training that you're going to lead for your team. Maybe it's agreeing to speak at an event on that specific topic. The format doesn't really matter. What matters is that in my scenario, I've made a public commitment to show up prepared. And now I have no choice but to learn the topic and become prepared. Now, what happens after that commitment is kind of interesting and even remarkable. Suddenly, I'm forced to study with urgency. I'm paying attention a little bit differently. I'm taking notes differently. I'm writing content. I'm organizing my thinking. I'm trying to connect ideas because I now have to present this, right? And the learning as a result becomes deep, and it becomes fast, because the stakes, again, putting something on the calendar is real. The stakes are real. There's an audience There's a date on the calendar. There's no way out of it. I'm not going to cancel it. Now, going back to Pat Flynn, the author I mentioned, Pat Flynn would say that this works because teaching isn't something you do after mastery. He would say it's part of how mastery actually happens. So when you're forced to explain something clearly to someone else, you identify every gap in your own understanding because you can't fake it in front of a room. And that accountability is what's going to drive your depth of understanding of the topic. Now, that was version one or option one. Let's go with the second version of forced learning that I use. And that's what I would call public proclamation. What I'll do is I'll tell people out loud, even on the record, right, that I know that I will know or I will accomplish X by such and such date. I say it to my peers, I say it to my team, those around me. Sometimes I even make the statement right here on this podcast. There's something about the social contract of a public commitment that I think impacts things differently than a private goal. Because again, nobody really wants to show up having not done what they said they would do. At least that's me. And that discomfort that I'm describing, that fear of letting people down or even being a fraud, it's a forcing function in its own right. Now, here's why this matters so much right now, in this very specific moment in time. We are living through the fastest period of change most of us have ever experienced. With AI and it reshaping industries in real time, the tools, the strategies, the skills that made you successful just 2 or 3 years ago, some of them are already obsolete today, which is crazy. And I think the pace of this is not going to slow down anytime soon, if at all. So in this environment, the ability to learn fast is not a nice to have as it maybe once was. It is, in fact, your competitive advantage. And I think the entrepreneurs who win in the next 5 to 10 years aren't necessarily going to be the smartest people in the room. They're going to be the ones who can identify what they need to learn and then actually learn it. And they're going to learn it rather quickly. They're going to have a deep understanding of it. And they're going to do this repeatedly with all sorts of topics. Here's the problem with the traditional approach to learning. It's a little too passive. We consume content. We listen to podcasts just like this one. We read books. We attend conferences. And all of that still has value. It's always had value. It will continue to have value. But that consumption alone rarely produces the transformation that we all aspire to experience. It produces what I would call familiarity, right? And familiarity is not the same thing as mastery. Forced learning turns this model upside down. It makes you a producer in this scenario and not just a consumer. It puts skin in the game and it compresses the timeline quite dramatically. Now, I think it's important to say that this approach is actually pretty uncomfortable because you're committing to teach something before you fully know it. And for some of you, you may have some anxiety just hearing me make that statement. You've got to stand up in front of people while you're actually still figuring it out. That's not easy for a lot of us. There is real vulnerability in that. But I've come to believe in my experience that the discomfort is actually the entire point of this. The discomfort is what separates the people who grow from those that maybe are a bit stagnant. What I've found personally is that the confidence doesn't come before the commitment. The confidence comes from surviving the commitment, which is a really interesting way, I think, to look at it. Every time you do this, you're going to prove to yourself that you can figure it out when your back is actually against the wall. And that sort of proof compounds and it starts to shape your identity a little bit. So as we wrap this up, here's your action item for this week. I want you to actually do this. Not just think about doing it. I want you to actually do it. I want you to identify one thing, one skill, one topic, one area of your business or your life where you know you need to get better. but you've maybe been waiting a little bit until you feel ready or whatever it may be before you take action. Now, do one of two things: either find an opportunity to teach it at a meeting or a workshop, peer group, whatever it may be, and commit to it right now, put a date on it, and make it real. Or if teaching isn't immediately accessible for you, I want you to just make a public proclamation. Tell someone whose opinion you respect that you will know this topic or you'll have this skill by a specific date. Just say it out loud, make sure you cast it out there, and create the accountability. Again, two options: find an opportunity to teach around the subject you're trying to learn more about, get it on the calendar, or just make a public proclamation. Don't wait until you're ready, just commit and then get ready. That's the whole idea with this, because we're not trying to rely on our motivation. I think a calendar invite and a public commitment will prompt you into action. That's all I have for you today. The No Days Off podcast. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, every single day brings a new opportunity to get better. So let's get after it.